Newswatch magazine presents the analysis of world news in the light of Bible prophecy with David J. Smith.
Revelation chapter 13 of your Bible tells us distinctly in verse 1 through 7 and 8 that there is coming a world government. It says this beast is going to rise out of the sea of humanity. It'll last for the final 3.5 years with an absolute totalitarian dictatorship. If it's going to be a dictatorship, this means it will become a police state. Is the United States of America right now headed toward becoming a police state? In this particular article, it shows that Kingman, Arizona feels boxed in because all the Fed troops that are coming into that area, the FBI, the BATF, and they're actually setting up what is called an outpost. And to the residents in that area, they literally feel like they are being in a police state at this time. Other people call our attention to Waco, Texas, and what happened to the Branch Davidians. When the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm came into the area, then backed up by the FBI, then Janet Reno gave her power behind it, and then finally the President of the United States. And here's where 86 individuals were literally burned to death, including 17 children. And then, before you can understand the enormity of this, the search warrant was never given. 2 truckloads of FBI and Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm agents came into the area, unloaded out of the truck, running toward the front door. At the same time, a helicopter gunship began to fire at the identical time that the troops from the ground did at the front door with David Koresh in that door. So this was an improper action which resulted in many, many people killed, 86, and many imprisoned with maximum penalty because they said they did not see any remorse or reason for it. No wonder. They were the ones assaulted. They were not the attackers. Then there was an incident that many other people point to in Ruby Ridge, Idaho, which a man by the name of Randy Weaver was simply a separatist. He and his wife and son and 2 daughters decided they would move away from everyone else and live in a rural, isolated area. Then the FBI on trumped-up charges came in, killed their son, 14-year-old, shot him in the back, then blew Vicki Weaver's head half off from a sniper. Randy Weaver went into court, was found totally innocent and all charges dropped, and yet not one FBI agent or Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm or any other of the military that came in as a part of the operation was even tried. They killed an innocent boy and an innocent woman and found him totally innocent also. And yet not one government agent was even found to be responsible for the deaths of these individuals. With incidences like this, no wonder people are beginning to say that we're headed toward a police state in the fulfillment of Bible prophecy in Revelation chapter 13. In this Time magazine article, it asks the question, how safe is safe? Then it goes on to describe how that individuals in America, how much of our freedoms are we willing to give up and go toward a totalitarian police state just for security. And it accompanies pictures of the FBI in their all-black Special Forces outfit, just like it was worn in Waco, Texas, just like that which was worn at Ruby Ridge when they surrounded Randy Weaver with 500 military and FBI and BATF personnel and to stand off against one individual. This is a picture of the building, the Murrah Building, Federal Building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. This is the catapult, I believe, that's going to catapult a police state in the United States of America. And I don't think all has been told, and much of the investigation has not been told to the American public. And I believe with all of my heart that they're going to railroad people into a conviction, or else they were set up in one way or another, because everything that I've discovered and found seems like it was a government deliberately set bomb for the purpose of getting House Bill 666 and its counterpart Senate version, which would give sweeping police state authority to the FBI and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and to the military. This particular newspaper article out of the USA Today shows what Bill Clinton and the administration really want out of all the Oklahoma City damage that was done. They want to create an entire new agency, practically with 1,000 additional agents, so that they can combat what they call anti-terrorism. But the point is, they've already classified who the terrorists are that they're going to try to combat. All people who are for the Constitution of the United States and against the New World Order under the United Nations organization. They're against all individuals who are currently associated with the civilian militia who watches over the safeguard of the Constitution and does not want tyranny to take hold. So this is what Bill Clinton is trying to push through the Senate, with the Democrat and the Republicans both jumping on the bandwagon. In this particular newspaper article, it shows how the FBI has been evolving in powers ever since the days of Franklin D. Roosevelt, when he tried to implement the first socialist program and socialist government in the United States. And today, with the Oklahoma City bombing, no matter how many innocent people were harmed there and the families are suffering, still they're going to use this in order to create an atmosphere where the police state can evolve. Also accompanying the article about the FBI's broadening of their powers, it talks about the fine line between protection of the citizens of the United States and persecution against people which they say are possible suspects, and how the Fourth Amendment of the United States will be affected if this anti-terrorism bill goes into force, because warrants will no longer be necessary for the police to come in and search your home or maybe seize some of your property. Bill Clinton, because of this Oklahoma City problem, is now asking the Justice Departments to give them permission to allow the military to be used in many of the investigations on terrorism. Do we realize the ramification about this? The military is not ever supposed to be used internally in the United States of America, and that'll violate everything the Constitution of the United States stands for. But if we understand who Bill Clinton is, a socialist, he went into Russia after he went to become a Rhodes Scholar, and then he went back into Italy in 1987 to be trained in the communist Marxist economic theories of Antonio Gramsci. Then we can begin to understand why he wants the military to expand its role internally in the United States. And this will lead directly toward a police state. Notice that the United States government is now seeking more money, not only for the expansion of military use, but all for internal affairs in the United States, but to add more FBI agents, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm agents. And it says to combat the militia. And the militia is a part of the Constitution that guarantees that a government will not overthrow the Constitution. And that's exactly what they're trying to do by bringing in the United Nations and passing treaties to supersede the Constitution and merge us into a world government. So when they say they want to combat the militia, they want to combat the only individuals that stand between total dictatorial takeover and our freedoms. In this particular magazine article, it shows freedom foes are actually federal abuse west of the Rocky Mountains. In Nevada right now, they're actually trying to reclaim their land from the federal government, which is not supposed to own property, period. And they're trying to retake it, and yet those in the federal government are the resistors against those individuals that are reclaiming their land. Other individuals that say that the United States is becoming a police state show the Waco-style siege in the Midwest of a man and his 9-year-old son. And they went in and they attacked and kicked down the door. He was armed. And then, of course, there was no search warrant that was actually given. And so he shot one of the agents, but they killed his son and him and tried to cover it up and make it look like that he killed his son and committed suicide. But that is not the case. So this is used as one of those items to show that the United States is moving toward a police state. President of the United States, Mr. Bill Clinton, went on the airwaves, and he actually said with an angry voice that there is hatred going out over talk shows, and that the militia and other individuals in this country that are talking about conspiracy and how there is a conspiracy within the government is wrong. In other words, what Bill Clinton is eventually going to do is use the Genocide Convention Treaty of the United Nations Organization, in which it says that individuals who have hate campaigns or who cause mental harm to individuals can be prosecuted. So that's how he's going to eventually stop anyone from discussing the Clinton administration, the FBI, the BATF, and our government from becoming a police state. The New American magazine actually published an entire issue showing how the United States of America was going toward a police state. And with this in mind, what I'd like to do now is begin to go in a chronological order and begin to discuss step by step how the United States is headed toward a police state. What are these black helicopters that individuals have been reporting, seeing them all over the United States of America? When did they begin? Why has the public become more aware of them in 1993, 4, and 5 than ever before? Let's begin our investigation by going back to the beginning of these sightings. Unmarked black helicopters are flying over our land in violation of all local and federal laws, carrying on their secret business and taunting and terrifying the populace. During the latter half of 1994 alone, hundreds of reports from all over the land of these black helicopters had been circulating by word of mouth, by underground and patriotic newspapers, and on special interest computer bulletin boards, and of course on talk shows all over the country. Although very few of these sightings are reported by the mainstream newspapers or radio or television, these are not easily dismissed occurrences linked to the lunatic fringe. Why would I say that? Because often there are very solid reports backed up with photographs and people with undisputed reputations. Whatever powers are dispatching the black helicopters, this is not a new phenomenon. It's only the frequency of the black helicopter sightings which have increased within the past few years. The following chronology is a year-by-year listing of significant sightings which there have been able to document of the black and unmarked mysterious helicopters and events that have been associated with each one of these. Let's go back and start in the year 1971. We're able to first document sightings of black helicopters beginning in August of 1971 in Lake County, Colorado. 40 sheep were found dead and blistered in some unknown manner after a rancher observed a helicopter flying over his animals. This sighting was to set the pace for incidents to follow during this period of time. Mystery chopper sightings often linked to cattle rustling or cattle mutilation. Remember that as we discuss the early years in which these mysterious helicopters were seen. Now let's advance to the year 1973. In April and May of 1973, there were at least 4 sightings of unmarked helicopters in Wayne County, Davis County, Audubon County, and Henry County in Iowa. In August of 1973, there were at least 3 separate sightings of choppers without identifying markings, which took place in Illinois, And then in Missouri, during the same month, there were 41 sightings of unmarked helicopters, which people found unusual enough to report to Pike County Sheriff's Office. In September of 1973, in San Francisco County, which is just south of St. Louis County, about 75 miles, Missouri, a man observed what he thought was a military helicopter, marked only by a large white spot on its tail section. In St. Louis County in Missouri, James Hagler spotted a helicopter hovering over his property on 3 occasions. Hagler said that someone in the chopper fired a shot the 3rd time that it appeared, and that he fired shots back, only to be fired at again by someone on the ground. After a search by the police was completed, Hagler was fired at yet again. In the summer of 1973, in Jersey County, Illinois, which is just across the river north of St. Louis, Missouri, about 50 miles, a large unmarked white cargo helicopter was observed by Mrs. Phyllis Butell and her son as the craft took off from a nearby field which contained a herd of cattle. During the same period of time, unmarked helicopters were observed by several witnesses in Minnesota, while low-flying mysterious helicopters were seen throughout the summer nights during the months by several witnesses in Kansas. Events which immediately preceded a wave of cattle mutilations in the area. There were also many cattle mutilations in the state of Missouri during this same year. Also in the summer of 1973, a deputy in Perry County, Missouri, spotted an unmarked helicopter flying over a ranch located near St. Mary's. At about the same time, 2 deputies observed unmarked helicopters hovering over cattle on a ranch in San Francisco, or they call it St. Francis County in Missouri. Now let's go to the year 1974. In Pottawatomie County, Iowa, during July of 1974, a farmer by the name of Robert Smith was shot at from a black twin-engine airplane and a white helicopter. There were sightings reported of both the airplane and chopper flying in the locale all spring. In Nebraska, from the 11th through the 17th of August of 1974, mysterious helicopters and lights were seen each night by a number of witnesses, according to the sheriff of Knox County. In September, October, and November of 1974, there were at least 4 sightings of mysterious choppers in Nebraska, in Elgin, Holt, Madison, and Cedar counties, with 3 of these sightings tentatively linked to cattle mutilations. In 1974, in Long Island, New York, unmarked black helicopters identified as Chinooks touched down on a public beach in the early morning. Men in black uniforms carrying M16 rifles threatened a local police officer who confronted them and demanded to know what was going on. Smaller black helicopters were observed in the vicinity at the same time, hovering over the ocean. Later reports suggested that the Army was transporting a warhead with one chopper and it had mechanical trouble. Although this story has never been confirmed, it also seems highly unlikely that this was the reason behind this event, trouble with a chopper carrying a nuclear warhead, because given the fact that the Army would not be anxious to publicize such an event. In the year of 1975, On January 22nd, 1975 began a remarkable number of unmarked helicopters, often equipped with bright spotlights, in Texas, which would last for 3 solid months. All this began when an unmarked chopper was observed circling an area where a possible mutilated cow had been found an hour earlier. In February, in Wood County, Texas, Mrs. A.D. Cruz heard a loud helicopter circling her house. A mutilated cow was found on the property the following morning. Also in February, numerous unidentified choppers were seen in Smith, Gregg, Bosquet, Coryell, Hamilton, Camp, Kaufman, and Hopkins counties in Texas. On Monday, February 24th, 1975, it proved to be a signal day for sightings of unidentified helicopters in Texas. In Camp County, law officers spoke with the occupants of a chopper which had landed. The 2 men claimed to be student pilots from Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. On the same night, there were at least 4 sightings which took place in Kaufman and Henderson counties in Texas. On the same night in Kaufman County, police deputies Carl Hall and Alton Ashworth responded to separate reports of sightings of mysterious choppers, both men arriving at different locations only to see the craft fly away. The following day, February 25th, in Bexar County, Texas, Stanley Jasick spotted a silver helicopter flying at a distance about 1/4 mile away. A dead, mutilated cow was found later in the same area. That same night, there were 3 sightings of unidentified choppers in Kaufman County, Texas. A farmer in Smith County, Texas, watched as an unmarked helicopter hovered over his property on February 27th, while on March 1st, Horace McQueen, a reporter for a local television station, rode with a state trooper as they pursued a mysterious chopper for miles. Thomas R. Adams, in his book The Choppers and the Choppers, which chronicles mysterious helicopters and cattle mutilations, informs us, and I quote, that the reports of low-flying helicopters spotlighting cattle ended in May in Texas. In response to citizen complaints, the Federal Aviation Administration conducted an investigation in July and August. The Air Force denied having any helicopter activity in the area, and that's according to the FAA. Here's what the Army said. The Army was operating some helicopters in the area earlier this year, but without more definitive information on dates, times, etc., they cannot confirm any specific flights. They stated it is not their policy to fly at night with their lights off. End of quote. During April, May, and June and July of 1975, unmarked mystery choppers were sighted in Marshall County, Kansas, and in at least 3 instances in Alamosa County, Colorado. Now that the Texas flights had seemingly ended, mystery helicopter sightings suddenly went wild in the state of Colorado in May of 1975. Is it possible that a major operation involving black helicopters moved its sphere of operations to Colorado because of too much publicity in the state of Texas? I would say that anything is possible. On the 29th of May in Elbert County, Colorado, a sighting of an unmarked chopper was linked to yet another cattle mutilation. 3 girls on horseback were chased by a helicopter on July 17th in El Paso County, Colorado, with a large number of chopper sightings taking place at the same time. Editor and publisher Mr. John Hines took a photo of a mysterious chopper the same night as the horseback chase took place. This area was to be the center of a great deal of cattle mutilation activity during the year of 1975. Now, have you noticed the trend back in the 1970s? Every time the choppers were seen over ranches, there was cattle mutilation. On July 23rd, in Elbert County, Colorado, Under Sheriff Bill Waugh observed a silent helicopter through his binoculars. The same night, a search was undertaken by the police for a mystery chopper which appeared and then reappeared in Teller County, Colorado. Within recent weeks of these events, there had been 40 incidences of cattle mutilation in Teller County, Colorado. On July 27th, 1975, 2 girls out walking were chased by a helicopter in Elbert County, Colorado. The helicopter was photographed and identified as an Army Bell Ranger. In August of 1975, there were 25 or more sightings of mystery choppers in several counties in Colorado. These sightings included an incident in which a rancher was chased by a helicopter near Franktown in Douglas County on the 8th, and an incident which took place in early August in which a youth driving a tractor was followed by an unidentified helicopter to his farmhouse, with the helicopter hovering for several minutes over the house. On August 21st, an unidentified helicopter was pursued by law enforcement agents in both Kimball County, Nebraska, and Logan County in Colorado. During the chase, the helicopter paused to hover over a SAC or SAC missile silo near Bushnell, Nebraska. A Mr. Ed Sanders publishes a report on the above incident in the Cattle Ranch for March of 1977. The Cattle Ranch was the newspaper that came out. He entitled the article, "The Air Force and the Great Chase of Northern Colorado." Sanders reported the following, I quote, "The night of Wednesday, August 21st, 1975, provided an example of a possible deliberate deception maneuver by cattle mutilators near Logan County, Colorado. The incident involved possible decoy men disguised as Air Force officers who may have been used to confuse and to throw off course a concerted land and air chase of helicopters thought to be involved in the plague of cattle mutilations in Logan County and nearby counties. Logan County is located in northeast Colorado, sugar beet, grain, and cattle country. During that summer, the helicopters had been flying by night over Logan County, and the cattle had been found mutilated the next morning. Sheriff's officers and even private groups such as Interstate 80 Control, a group of CBers, had been organizing to give chase to these phantom helicopters. Around 10 p.m. on Wednesday, August 21st, a helicopter was reported heading into Logan County from the east, and Sheriff Tex Graves and his staff took chase. In addition to some 17 ground units that ultimately took part in the chase, Sheriff Graves rented a private plane in which 2 sheriff's officers and a pilot rode. The night was clear, and the aircraft could run without lights. During the night, a pickup truck containing 2 purported Air Force officers began to assist the chase, claiming to be receiving over the radio in the truck radar information from Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming, located northwest of Logan County. The sheriff's vehicles on the ground were not equipped to pick up the Air Force frequencies, so had to fly on the information relayed from the pickup truck of the supposed Air Force men, who would relay the supposed location of the aircraft being chased, as indicated by the radar at the Air Force Base. Only the next day, after the chase was long over, did reporters and sheriff's officers learn from Warren Air Force Base that they had no radar system that could have been used to track the helicopters. The only radar facilities they had, they said, were weather radar facilities. Sheriff Graves later referred to the alleged helpers in the pickup trucks that said they were Air Force. They were only jokers playing games. During the chase, which spilled over into southern Nebraska, the supposedly Air Force men in the pickup truck kept announcing that radar indicated that there was another aircraft flying near the chase plane at various times. But the officers and pilot, 3 men with glasses, never saw a plane. Sheriff Graves told the Greeley, Colorado Tribune the chase ended about 4:30 in the morning near a missile site in southwest Nebraska, when the spotter plane lost sight of the Phantom helicopter. The plane reporter, Mr. Bill Jackson, of the Sterling, Colorado Journal-Advocate, told us, quote, saw the lights of the thing below them. And you know, it was a clear night. And when the light went out, that's what everybody thought, that they had landed. But the plane came down to 100 to 150 feet. He couldn't see anything. The only thing that was there was a missile silo, end of quote. Out of all this, several questions remain after this particular incident. Number one, were the 2 officers from the Air Force merely practical jokers having fun with these law enforcement officers? Number 2, were the 2 men merely masquerading as Air Force personnel, and were they actually part of a mutilation network? Number 3, sad to ask this one, but is the United States Air Force involved in supplying cover for the mutilators? That is one of the questions that I feel needs to be answered so that people will clear up in their minds why the cattle mutilations of the mid-1970s. August of 1975 was also the beginning of a Montana helicopter display. And by May of 1976, there were at least 130 reports of helicopters and unidentified craft which had been observed in that state. During this 1975 period, black helicopters were seen over sensitive military installations, and their sightings occurred during the same period as similar other flights over other military installations had taken place in Maine and in Michigan. In September of 1975, there were over 40 sightings of unmarked helicopters in Colorado. The incidents often occurring in areas where cattle mutilations were taking place. In early September of 1975, a family in Rio Grande County, Colorado, observed a helicopter with something which looked like a litter basket hanging underneath it. The following day, a mutilated bull was found nearby the sighting where it had taken place, suggesting that this litter basket arrangement may have had something to do with the lifting or transporting of cattle. On the 22nd of September, in Crowley and Pueblo counties in Colorado, a man driving a pickup truck was forced off the road by a mystery helicopter. He called for assistance on his CB, and 2 policemen responded to the call. One policeman fired his rifle at the helicopter. Deputies from 3 counties, guards stationed at the Pueblo Army Depot, and Colorado State Police were led on a wild goose chase before the helicopter finally eluded them. The helicopter made a sound like the whistling of air coming from a tire. This report matches numerous helicopter incidents in which witnesses say that these craft are quieter than regular helicopters, although they're not completely silent. On October of 1975, it saw a continuance of the Colorado helicopter sightings, with a minimum of 30 sightings being reported in the state. On the 3rd of October, in Weston County, Wyoming, Raymond Jones and some of his neighbors woke up hearing a high-pitched whine, like a jet turbine starting up. On October 6th, Jones found the mutilated carcass of one of his cows in a nearby pasture. On October 7th, Sheriff Willis Larson of Weston County, Wyoming, received a report that there was a helicopter hovering northeast of Newcastle in Wyoming. Larson drove to the site and observed the following according to his report in the University of Wyoming's Branding Iron newspaper of October 14th, 1975. I quote, "I reached the top of the ridge and saw an object to the west, near Highway 85 north. It was an orange, wedge-shaped object resembling a helicopter in appearance. The tapered end had a bright red light. I was confused and looked at it through binoculars. It was making sudden, jerky Z movements, very fast, I thought. I called my wife and asked her to call Bachman, that's one of his assistants, to look at it. Bachman was already looking at the object. He reported it in the same position as the sheriff. The object descended, and Larson lost sight of it. Bachman continued to observe it and saw it go down and its lights go out. I called for a special deputy to take my position and dispatched another deputy to the south so we could bracket the object in a triangle. I then went to the airport. The mail plane was landing at the airport just as I arrived. Bachman pointed the object out to me. 30 seconds later, it went up and disappeared, just like shutting out a light. Later, as we were returning to town, a sudden bright flash lit the sky like a flash bulb. An hour and a half later, the same lady who had originally reported this particular sighting called and reported the object in the same location. I went out to check on it again, and the sky was split by 5 sudden flashes in very quick succession, centered in the northeast. Later, a glowing light would appear in the eastern sky and would be viewed by many residents of the area. Lights rising over trees were reported by campers. Brilliant flashes were reported by a motorist, and homeowners saw strange lights Obviously, something strange was happening in the sky around Newcastle on the night of October 7th. End of quote. This is an example of a mysterious helicopter sighting, which also confirms the more classic UFO sightings. In other words, people saw something, but just because they saw something that was abnormal to them does not mean that it was an extraterrestrial craft of some type. On the 5th of October in Alamosa County, Colorado, a black helicopter with a searchlight was chased by two police officers in their car. The same day, a similar mystery helicopter was seen southeast of Alamosa. From October 5th to October 9th in Alamosa County, unidentified helicopters were observed flying at numerous locations between 10:30 p.m. and 3 a.m. each night. Several of these helicopters were noted to have very powerful searchlights. In October of 1975, a rancher in Sweetwater County in southern Wyoming, southwestern Wyoming, who was also a deputy of Sweetwater and Uintah counties, was driving in southwest Uintah County when a dark green helicopter with no identifying markings suddenly swooped into sight and began to go along with his truck. The rancher tried to outrun the helicopter in a breakneck 90-mile-per-hour chase. The rancher stated that the occupants of the helicopter were two long-haired men in cowboy hats who were laughing at his predicament. He also noted that there was a covering on the side of the aircraft, the helicopter, which apparently concealed the helicopter's identifying markings. The helicopter sped ahead of the truck and then landed in the middle of the road. The rancher stopped his truck, then stepped out of the vehicle. Luckily, he was carrying a shotgun in the truck. He fired 3 shots at the helicopter as it was beginning to lift off and speed away. The rancher's sighting was verified by a state trooper who also saw the same helicopter. On each night from the 13th to the 17th of October, again in Alamos County, Colorado, an Army green mysterious helicopter flew west over the Great Sand Dunes National Monument during the day and returned by the same route at night. The helicopter was said to sound like an airplane rather than a helicopter. Between October 30th and November 30th in Union and Quay counties in New Mexico, there was a minimum of 30 helicopter sightings. While the FAA announced that they were going to investigate these occurrences, they later denied any records of any investigation. During the summer of 1975 in Douglas County, Colorado, an unmarked helicopter landed for a short time approximately 300 feet from a house located in Franktown. The helicopter was Army green and curiously was said to be constructed of solid metal lacking a glass observation bubble. But of course, this could have been simply misidentification. In the fall of 1975, in Washington County, Colorado, ranchers were reporting numerous mystery helicopters and their connections to cattle mutilations. A rancher's daughter at home by herself observed a helicopter flying over a field approximately 100 yards from her home. She described the sound of the helicopter as muffled. A dead cow was later found on the ranch. The rancher was stated to have believed that the animal had been lifted and then dropped into a pool of water from above. By November of 1975, the Colorado helicopters had dried up. Although sightings of various mystery helicopters in Colorado would continue right on to the present day, but not as much as at that time. Sightings during November are documented in Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Texas, as well as a flurry of sightings in Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. On the 2nd and 3rd of November in the Cascade, Choteau, Pondera, and Teton counties of Montana, there were numerous sightings of unmarked helicopters. At least 2 of these craft were seen over military installations, missile sites. Again in Montana on the 7th and 8th of November, this time in Fergus and Wheatland counties, unidentified helicopters were seen over missile installations. The Strategic Air Command offered this information, quote, "The craft were suspected to have been helicopters due to hovering ability of the craft. Witness interpretations of the sound produced and placement of lights on the craft," end of quote. In the first week of November, in Johnson County, Wyoming, residents spotted an unmarked helicopter with pontoon-style landing gear. 4 calves were mutilated in the area about the same time. In early December, in Franklin County, Kansas, 3 large helicopters, troop carrier size, were observed landing near Lane, Kansas. No further information was available from those sightings. On the 8th of December, in the Cascade and Teton counties of Wyoming, a number of small, dark-colored helicopters operating between 50 and 150 feet off the ground were seen by residents and were chased by police officers in their cars. One sighting of these helicopters was by a group of workers at a missile installation west of Choteau. Announcements followed that the helicopters were possibly Canadian in origin and were heading toward the United States-Canadian border. On the 16th of December in Lamar County, Texas, investigators on their way to the site of a cattle mutilation saw 2 camouflaged helicopters in flight. Mid-December in Cascade County, Montana, a crew at a missile launching site saw 3 mystery helicopters flying above the installation at an altitude of approximately 150 feet. A radio message was received at the sheriff's office stating that the helicopters were from the National Guard, but an official at the Guard later denied the report. During December, in Franklin County, Kansas, local deputies and the Highway Patrol pursued 3 unidentified helicopters, which had first been observed on the ground. Also, during December of 1975, sightings of mystery helicopters in Colorado continued to be numerous, although they abruptly dropped off at the beginning of 1976. One helicopter was observed to flash a light with an answer being flashed from a nearby mountain. December of 1975 was the beginning of what mystery helicopter researcher Tom Adams called the Siege of 75 in northeastern New Mexico. Again, these unidentified helicopters may have moved their base of operations after coming under too much scrutiny from the public and the press. In Colfax, Harding, Clay, and Union counties, a minimum of 30 mystery helicopter sightings took place in December of 1975 in those counties of New Mexico. And there were 4 cattle mutilations. According to the Tacoma or the Tucumcari, New Mexico News, they reported, and I quote, James Gordon, Federal Aviation Admiral Local Area Coordinator announced late Wednesday, November 5th, 1975, the FAA was officially entered into the investigation of the sighting of the aircraft over northeastern New Mexico. At the present time, the FAA investigators were in the field taking depositions from individuals who have actually seen these aircrafts or black helicopters, end of quote. The FAA was later to deny that the investigations ever took place. During the latter part of 1975, over flights by unknown aerial craft, they took place over sensitive military installations in states such as Maine, Michigan, North Dakota, and Montana. Craft were also seen over several missile silos in Montana and in the vicinity of the Canadian Forces Station and radar installations in Ontario, Canada. Now let's go forward to the year 1976. In Franklin County, Kansas, there were numerous sightings of unidentified helicopters throughout January of 1976. Dorothy Detweiler, living in rural Lane, Kansas, observed 3 helicopters. 2 were inexplicably hovered over her home for 2 minutes. 7 other families also reported the mystery helicopters the evening of the 16th of January. On the 26th of January, also in Franklin County, Kansas, Virginia Birkdahl observed a helicopter with a blue-green light visible through its windows. It didn't sound like any kind of aircraft she had heard before, she said. During February and April of 1976, there were several sightings of unidentified helicopters in Montana and Colorado. On the 31st of May, in Elbert County, Colorado, a mutilated cow was found. Sheriff George Yarnell, responding to the report, saw an unidentified and unmarked helicopter flying around the area. Then it departed. Observers at the scene said that the helicopter was flying at so low an altitude that they could see a number on it, N9143F, which was said to be registered to City Car Terminal Company of Detroit, Michigan. Although there was no information of additional follow-up investigation on that number. On various unknown dates during May and June, in Judith Bassin County, Montana, up to 12 helicopters in pairs were observed in flight one evening. There were a number of other sightings in this area during the same time period, and 4 cattle mutilations were found where they'd been hovering. Unmarked choppers were observed in Colorado, Montana, Kansas, and New Mexico in June, July, August, and September of 1976. In early autumn of 1976, a hunter in the Red Mountain area near Norris, Montana, saw a black helicopter without identification markings flying overhead and then swooped below a low hill. The hunter climbed the hill and observed a black helicopter, which he later identified as a Bell Jet Ranger, parked on the ground. 7 men who apparently came from the helicopter and were wearing civilian clothes were climbing the hill in the direction that he was coming. The hunter waved at the group and shouted greetings. Then, as he saw the group more clearly, he was surprised to realize that the men were all Orientals and speaking a language that he could not understand. The Oriental men turned and headed back to the helicopter, and when the hunter attempted to follow, they started to run. They reached the helicopter while the hunter was still in hot pursuit, but they took off before he could get there. During late September and early October, in Los Animas County, Colorado, there were sightings of soundless choppers on 4 ranches. In one incident, 4 ranchers were herding cattle near Model, Colorado. 4 helicopters, painted yellow and black with tinted cockpit glass, flew in diamond formation toward the ranchers. 3 of the helicopters hovered in place, while another of the craft swooped down and scattered the herd of cattle. One of the ranchers displayed a rifle, and the single helicopter rejoined the other 3. And the craft then departed as mysteriously as they had appeared. The rancher tentatively identified the helicopters as Bell Jet Rangers. On the 10th of October in 1976, in Wadena County, Minnesota, a silver and blue helicopter landed in a farmyard, and a group of children ran toward it, at which time the helicopter immediately took off. On October 1st, a mutilated cow had been found on the same property. During November and December of 1976, there were several sightings of lights and unmarked helicopters in Illinois and Colorado. There were also incidences in both states of cattle mutilations. Now let's go to the year 1977. Reports of unmarked helicopters are very scanty during the year 1977, although there are records of the helicopters in Colorado, Arizona, and Texas, and in every single case that was recorded, they were linked to cattle mutilations. Now let's go to the year 1978. In early January 1978, 2 helicopters were sighted over a ranch in Perkins County, Nebraska. A mutilated bull was found in the same area the following day. In early June, in Los Animas County, Colorado, there were 2 sightings of a single black helicopter. 2 mutilation incidences occurred in adjoining Herfano County in June of 1978. In mid-October, on a ranch at Sublette County, Wyoming, a number of observers saw a white helicopter with a blue bubble flying by. A mutilated cow was later discovered on that ranch. On November 9th, 1978, in Benton County, Arkansas, Lieutenant Don Rystrom, a rancher who had served in the Marine Corps, was involved in the investigation of a number of cattle mutilations in the area. Rystrom heard a helicopter flying in from the east toward the ranch. The unidentified helicopter flew across a pasture and then followed power lines, finally turning north to fly away. Rystrom only caught a glimpse of the craft, but identified it as a dark painted Huey helicopter with a single white light on the fuselage. The following night, the helicopter was back, following the same path that it had the previous night. This time, Rystrom was outside in time to train the spotlight of his police car on the helicopter, which suddenly accelerated northward and out of sight. Rystrom commented on the unusual popping sound that the helicopter made rather than the usual sounding of a helicopter. On the 13th of November, in the Santa Clara Indian Reservation, 2 cows were found mutilated. A resident of the area stated that he heard a helicopter on the morning of the 13th of 1978. Now let's go to the year 1979. In January 1979, in Eddy County, New Mexico, 5 horses were mutilated. For a few days after the mutilations, helicopters had been seen in the area. On April 8, 1979, in Rio Arriba County near Dulce, New Mexico, police witnessed a craft which they thought might have been a helicopter hovering and playing a searchlight over a ranch where there had been several mutilations of cattle. The craft rose without sound and flew over the mountain near Dulce. During May and June of 1979, 4 or 5 mutilations took place in El Paso County in Colorado. At about this time, dark choppers were seen flying around area ranches and homes. On July 10, 1979, in Faulkner County, Arkansas, Charles Reynolds found a mutilated calf on his farm, which he estimated had died 2 to 3 days prior on approximately the 8th of July. He had observed a helicopter hovering over his pasture on the 8th. On the 21st of July in Conway County, Arkansas, a cow disappeared at about the time that a mysterious helicopter flew over the area. The mutilated cow was found on the 23rd, and witnesses noted that tree limbs above where the cow lay were broken. Again, in Conway County, Arkansas, on August 12th, a blue, unmarked helicopter was seen in an area where a mutilated cow was found 2 days later. Throughout August, there were a number of cattle mutilations in Faulkner and Conway Counties, Arkansas, as well as sporadic sightings of unidentified helicopters. During the first week of August of 1979, a very valuable bull was mutilated in Alberta, Canada. About a week later, a helicopter had hovered over the location where the bull was found. Now let's go forward to the year 1980. In 1980, we saw a dramatic reduction in the number of sightings of black and mysterious helicopters. On the 27th of October, however, in Apache County, Arizona, a mutilated and burned bull, appearing as if it had been partially cooked in an oven, was found. 2 or 3 days earlier, an unexplainable beam of light had swept over the area. Later, on the 29th, a helicopter flew over the area where the bull had been found. Much of this information that I'm giving to you today came from a book, Black Helicopters Over America by Jim Keith. Now let's return to 1981 in the procession of these mysterious helicopters. In Alberta, Canada, on the 28th of September, a mutilated bull was found. In the grass near the bull was 3 worn triangular patches. A helicopter had been heard the previous night, and another was seen that day as the mutilated bull was being examined. Now let's go to the next year, 1982. On May 28th of 1982, a mutilated cow was found in San Juan County, New Mexico. An unidentified helicopter was seen hovering in the area on May 31st of 1982. And a small green helicopter was observed hovering over the site of the mutilation on June 1st. And in El Paso County, Colorado, on September 29th of 1982, a chopper was seen flying near the site of a cow mutilation that had taken place on September 16th. Another mutilated cow was later found in the day on September 29th. During late September and early November in Sweetwater County, Wyoming, and adjoining Daggett County, Utah, there were a number of cattle mutilations and associated mystery copter sightings. Now let's advance to the year 1983. In Washington County, Colorado, on May 21st, 1983, a mutilated cow was found by a family of ranchers. Reportedly, the third mutilation that this family had experienced. A mystery helicopter hovering over the mutilation site was reported by a neighbor within 2 days. Then in 1984, on June 3rd, in an area reported to have had animal mutilations for over a decade, campers observed a black, unmarked helicopter in King County, Washington. The helicopter was identified as a Huey. Then in 1985, on April 21st in Marshall County, Alabama, a cow mutilation occurred on a farm adjoining another where a mutilation had happened a year earlier. On a third adjoining farm, a helicopter was heard the night after the mutilation. In El Paso County, Colorado, in late November or early December, a mutilated cow was found on Eldon Butler's ranch. The previous night, Butler had heard a hovering helicopter near his ranch. Now let's advance forward to the year 1993. There seems to have been at least a partial stopping in unmarked helicopter sightings during the period of 1985 to the beginning of 1993. In 1993, there was a marked resumption of mystery helicopter sightings, but the character of these reports had suddenly changed. Less often were the helicopters seen in situations involving cattle mutilations, and more often were they seen in urban settings, big cities, and flying in formation, or in the context of covert military maneuvers. In St. Louis, Missouri, on March 5th, 1993, 5 small black helicopters were observed flying from the southeast to the northwest. Later the same morning, these 3 large transport helicopters were observed traveling over the house, going north to south. The middle craft of the group was described as a gunship. On the 17th of March, 5 black helicopters pouring out black smoke were also seen over the St. Louis, Missouri area, all described as large gunships. The helicopters were unmarked, flat black, one behind the other, 300 to 500 yards off the ground. And before moving to the Dallas area, I personally stood on the back deck of my home and watched a black helicopter go over from the southwest of St. Louis, Missouri, over to the Illinois side, northeast of my home. A letter reporting a black helicopter in Michigan was printed in what is called the Patriot Report for March of 1993. And as the policy of this newsletter is, the writer of the letter remained anonymous, but I will quote that letter. Well, I found out today that the black helicopters are for real. If I had any doubts that there was such a thing, That doubt was put to rest today. At 10:45 a.m. on March 9th, 1993, one went over our house at breakneck speed. We have commercial helicopters fly over almost daily. Believe me, there is no comparison. This helicopter, flying at about 500 feet, had pulled out all the stops. It was solid black. No definitive insignia or numbers on its fuselage, with the exception of 3 small white vertical stripes at the tail rudder, totally devoid of any other identifying marks. Obviously, at the rate of speed that it was going, it was not waiting around for anyone to come to that conclusion. Interesting enough, I could tell this was a helicopter of a different type than any commercial helicopter, as it was so noisy and its blades beating the air so loud that anyone must realize that this was not an ordinary helicopter. Its overflight lasted but a few seconds over our village. It came from the northeasterly direction down M60, possibly its origin from Fort Custer, heading in a direction of the South Bend, Indiana direction. Again, I say it was solid black, possibly of the Scorpion class, only larger. I would say this is not fun and games, Americans. Something is going down, else why no markings and excessive speed? And of course the name was withheld, but the letter was from the state of Michigan. The following article from the Stockton, California Register, that's March 4th, 1993, was entitled Marines Practice Storming Stockton. Attempted to put any fears to rest about an impending invasion, urban environment invasion of helicopters. I quote the article: "If Marine helicopters start buzzing your house today or tonight, don't be alarmed. It's only a drill. The 13th Marine Expedition Unit from Oceanside will conduct urban environment training. For those who don't speak military language, that means about 2,000 Marines practice approaching an unfamiliar city with common street maps. In Stockton, the Marines will pinpoint buildings to get more familiar with the city. People will not notice the training on the ground because we travel to and from site in civilian clothes," said Marine Chief Warrant Officer Hartman Slate, a spokesman for the trainers. "What they will see is the helicopters. The aircraft will include Cobra attack helicopters and the cargo and troop transport Super Stallion, the free world's largest helicopter. At night, as they fly at the lowest point, about 20 stories high, you may hear the flying machines but not see them because they'll be flying with their lights off and using night vision goggles," said Marine Sergeant Dave Herscorn. End of quote. During July of 1993, there were multiple sightings of unmarked helicopters over Santa Rosa, California. Here's a news story from the Santa Rosa Press-Democrat dated August 9th, 1993. And the byline was by Clark Mason. Quote, "In a whirl over mysterious copters, DEA agents were on a mission, maybe. It took a week of phone calls to more than a dozen government agencies, but finally the mystery of the low-flying military helicopters over West Sonoma County last month has been cleared up. Well, most likely cleared up. Contrary to popular opinion, the choppers that jangle nerves and spooked pets and livestock in Occidental Camp Meeker and Cazadero were not sent by the state's campaign against marijuana planting. We're not active yet, said Dale Ferranto, a campaign against marijuana planting special agent in Sacramento. If anybody's flying, it's not a camp machine. And although the flights were reported about the same time of former President George Bush's visit to the ultra-exclusive Bohemian Grove encampment, it wasn't Secret Service agents on those flights. A California National Guard spokesman said even if the helicopters belonged to the Guard, there was no way of immediately determining their intent, because they fly in support of 75 different law enforcement agencies. You need to get the right office doing the mission, said National Guard Major Ron Hooks. If they want to, they'll tell you what they're doing. Sonoma County Sheriff Mark Ide, IHDE, said his department was not involved. The sheriff said the first he heard about military helicopters disturbing West County residents was when he read it in the newspaper a week ago. He said the Federal Drug Enforcement Agency held a training school in Sonoma County 2.5 weeks ago and used 8 or 9 fixed-wing aircraft provided by the Civil Air Patrol. But to his knowledge, no helicopters were used. Maurice Brown, DEA spokesman in San Francisco, said the agency was National Guard helicopters in Sonoma County as part of an LSD bust earlier in the summer. But he was unaware of any recent operations in Sonoma County. But as it turned out, some of the denials appear to be a case of the left hand not knowing what the right hand was doing, because the choppers were indeed supplied by the National Guard in conjunction with a DEA exercise. Sonoma County Under Sheriff Dale Moore said the Guard helicopters were used to ferry agents in and out of marijuana gardens in the Geyserville area and other northwest areas of Sonoma County. Even though Moore doubted the helicopters were in the Occidental area, irate citizens had no doubt they were. The residents questioned why they were flying over a relatively populated rural area where they were unlikely to find pot gardens of any consequence. Ed Barr, an Occidental business consultant, said he was sitting outside with a client, a former Vietnam veteran, who got instant bad memories when the airships showed up. They were like 2 helicopter gunships. They appeared over the rise. It was like slamming him into the Vietnam experience, he said. They kept circling overhead. Kathy Weeks, a woman who lives between Cazadera and Duncan Mills, said a big drab olive Huey chopper with a red cross painted on its front flew over her home July 20th and kept circling over only 200 feet above her house. It kept flying around and around for 45 minutes, she said. It was uncalled for. I didn't know if there was a lost child or a fugitive. It was real low. My 2 dogs got so freaked out they ran off and didn't come back for hours. Weeks said the helicopter was so close she could see the clothes of its occupants, including one mustached man with sunglasses, dressed in civilian clothes. He was dressed in stone-washed jeans and a light blue golf shirt. I could pick the guy out of a lineup, she said, adding she tried to call and complain later, but could get no one from the National Guard to acknowledge the helicopter. Captain Stan Zizatarsky, spokesman for the Army Aviation Branch of the Guard, confirmed that his agency's helicopters were used in Sonoma County July 1993, from July 19th through the 23rd, in conjunction with a DEA office in Sacramento. Periodically, we have observation school, training school, how to compensate for the effects of flight in spotting marijuana from the air, he said. We provided 3 helicopters to do that. And then he went on to describe how they were using these in operations all over the country. During December of 1993, in Priest Lake, Idaho, a black helicopter hovered 50 feet above a cabin, observed by a resident of the cabin. Then the helicopter moved off and hovered above other cabins in the area. It said there was many military aircraft flying very low over Priest River during the same period of time, and were often seen headed north toward Priest Lake. During the summer of 1993, residents of Midtown Atlanta, Georgia, were shocked in the early hours of the morning as 3 military helicopters came churning through their high-rise condos. Marcia Brown, living at the 27-story Colony Towers, said that the sudden appearance of the helicopters was frightening and sort of terrifying. She said she watched the dark, unmarked helicopters flying across Atlanta's Central Plaza and then rise to hover over the Colony Square building. And she went on and dramatized this entire incident and said that it was a mockery of the citizens that these unmarked helicopters would come into the area. Later, Atlanta Police Major Wayne Mock said that this was a Special Operations Command unit conducting urban training exercises, and they would be doing it about 4 times a year, and that it would begin to use not only helicopters but other type of aircraft. He said the Joint Operations Command was back in Atlanta in July of 1994, although this time they left the helicopters behind, perhaps because of the public reaction the previous time. The Atlanta Journal, dated July 12, 1994, described what took place. Quote, Atlanta, Midtown explosions, part of military training. The automatic weapons fire and explosions that echoed around an abandoned state office building on Peachtree Street in Midtown Saturday afternoon, cracking a window in a nearby business, was a military urban training exercise, according to Atlanta Police Major Wayne Mock, head of Special Operations. It said that the military units he would not identify perform simulated hostage rescue and life-saving exercises for several days last week. He refused to provide details except that the training, in contrast to similar larger-scale maneuvers in Midtown in summer of 1993, did not involve helicopters. And then he went on to describe the terror that it struck in the hearts and minds of the people in downtown Atlanta that were not even told what was about to take place. If these were regular maneuvers, why was Major Mock unwilling to provide details to the press or to identify the military units that were involved? The APRA News describes another tactical maneuver involving black helicopters in the state of Georgia. I quote, in August of 1993, The United States Marine Corps shocked and disturbed suburban neighborhoods in Stone Mountain, Georgia, as they flew military helicopters low over private residences in the middle of the night. The UH-1 and CH-46 helicopters, which are based at Camp Lejeune and New River Station, North Carolina, were conducting urban drills in DeKalb County. In one such operation, they made a noonday flight from Dobbins Air Force Base to a simulated hostage situation at a motel near the intersection of Interstate 20 and Chandler Road. End of quote. In late 1993, in Lewis County, Washington, near Mossy Rock, a man stumbled across a black helicopter which had landed on a remote section of his property. Men from the chopper were walking around nearby the helicopter, and he was ordered by them to leave that area of his land and to keep his mouth shut about him spotting them. No further information was given of this particular incident. Beginning on April 30th of 1993, the mysterious helicopter sightings took a new turn. The following story is reprinted from what is called the Patriot Report of June 1993. Quote, according to reports from American citizens around the nation, military aircraft have been seen spraying over certain residential areas and particular remote targets where patriots live. The reason helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft have been spraying those areas is unknown. A man in St. Maries, Idaho, reported seeing a military jet on April 30th, 1993 over a residential area. It had two unusual shaped canisters near the wing tips. It came over slowly at approximately 1,000 feet, sprayed something, then banked and left quickly the area. Birds were found dead in the area that was sprayed. A twin-engine aircraft flew over Knoxon, Montana, spraying something last fall. A few weeks later, a 2-year-old boy died from a mysterious illness. Peyton, Colorado. Landowners fighting with a federal housing authority to keep their land have been sprayed numerous times by black helicopters. They reported becoming deathly ill in addition to losing 10 cattle, 7 dogs, and finding 28 deer dead on their property. The local sheriff traced the helicopters back to the National Guard in Denver, Colorado. The National Guard denies spraying the rancher's property. A doctor noticed some spraying by aircraft south of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. He took an air sample and a sample on a plant. He tested these samples in his laboratory and found them to be biological. He said that he had never seen anything like it, and it may have been genetically altered. In other words, why was it all during the 1970s that these mysterious helicopters were seen around cattle mutilations? Could it be that they were extracting something from these cattle and developing biological agents that they could use on individuals who would stand up against the New World Order? An incident of a similar nature took place on May 19th, 1994, near Trout Creek in Montana. 2 unmarked jet aircraft crisscrossed a valley in this area. A woman who had watched these jets became ill with what were described as radiation symptoms. Within one day, all of the woman's pets and chickens, which was approximately 175 total, had died. Let's bring it forward now to the year 1994. The following story is reprinted from the Patriot Report dated February of 1994. Dallas home erupts in flames after helicopters flew over. Michael Benn, the initiator of the petition to impeach President Clinton, was rudely disturbed by the sound of military helicopters at 6:40 a.m. Tuesday, January the 11th, 1994. Black helicopters with their side doors open flew suspiciously low over the neighborhood twice. On the second pass, the neighbor's home across the street was engulfed in flames. Other neighbors reported hearing a loud roar and seeing rockets or missiles being fired at the roof of the house. At 7:30 a.m., a white flatbed truck arrived and for some unknown reason took out all the appliances and electrical items. At 9:30 a.m., a white van drove up and a man dressed in white coveralls started going through the rubble. 4 holes were reportedly seen on the roof with white powder residue around them. The fire marshal said that the cause of the fire was not lightning, and there was an investigation ongoing at the time. This incident was reported on shortwave radio on January 21st when Tom Valentine interviewed Michael Benn during the Radio Free America broadcast. He believes, this is Michael Benn, that the helicopter attack was supposed to have been on his home by the attacker, but the attackers targeted the wrong house. He has just collected, at that time, his 12 millionth signature for the petition to impeach President Bill Clinton. And he believes it's quite possible that someone wanted him out of the way. End of quote. In the Thatcher Thunders newsletter, R.G. Thatcher talks about his own mysterious helicopter sighting which took place in East Texas. Quote, on Wednesday, January 19th, 1994, upon hearing the loud clack of an approaching helicopter, I stepped out of my little study building to see a Soviet Mi-8 HIP helicopter fly over the north front of my family's property, which is located about 7 miles south of Richards, Texas. It was initially flying from the east to west. It was 12:55 p.m. The sun was out. I was shocked to see one, but that I wasn't mentally prepared for such an eventuality. You see, I've talked and written about Soviet communist aircraft, big transports, jet fighters, and military helicopters flying our skies under various pretexts since 1990. I make it a habit to visually inspect with binoculars every noisy helicopter and big aircraft that flies over my area during the daytime. I, however, did not have my binoculars handy, but that didn't matter. The helicopter couldn't have been more than 175 to 200 yards away. The alarming problem with this helicopter was that it was flying less than 100 feet off the ground. It was flying nap of the earth, NOP, This is considered the safest technique to minimize observation by enemy ground observer or radar, but it is also the slowest method. This technique requires it to fly at a very low level and fly around objects rather than over them, weaving just above when unavoidable and between the treetops, not going along a straight course higher above the treetops. The helicopter was painted in two-tone camouflage colors of pale green and tan. I feel the helicopter was trying to minimize its exposure to both people on the ground and radar. By the time it got over my next door neighbor's large front yard, it turned to an approximate northwest direction. End of quote. During the beginning months of 1994, black helicopters and jet transports, all lacking markings, were reported and confirmed by eyewitnesses to be flying in the Okanogan, Ferry, and Stevens County region of northeast Washington. In May of 1994, in Carson City, Nevada, a flat black or olive drab OH-58 Kiowa, that's a Jet Ranger helicopter, hovered over an urban area for 20 minutes. There were no markings on the aircraft, although an infrared pod or minigun was observed on the fuselage. On May 7th, in Harrigan, Louisiana, a teenager who was home from school was chased for 45 minutes by a black helicopter with a rope hanging down from it. The persons in the chopper pointed scopes at the teenager, which he thought were weapons. A report was made to the police chief in Harrigan, but he indicated that the helicopter was owned by the federal government and that he lacked any authority to do anything about it. During the second week of May of 1994, persons traveling in a car on Highway 395 near Spokane, Washington, were chased by a black helicopter. The craft traveled with a car for several miles, hovering above it. And when they tried to elude the helicopter by turning off the road, a rope ladder was dropped and men in black uniforms carrying weapons began to descend from the helicopter. The driver immediately drove the car back onto the highway, and increased traffic is believed to be the reason for the copter to suddenly depart. More and more automobiles began to come onto that particular highway, so the helicopter was seen flying away very rapidly. Also seen in May of 1994 was a Russian Hind helicopter on the ground at the McDonnell Douglas facility in Phoenix, Arizona. In late June or early July, heavy black helicopter movement was reported near Knoxville, Tennessee. A witness reported constantly seeing black gunships flying toward Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and that they flew from 2 to 8 at a time, very low and very fast. On July 19, 1994, a center school or senior high school in Kansas City, Missouri, a charcoal black twin rotor Chinook spiraled downward over the school to an altitude of 100 feet and then circled the athletic field for 13 minutes. During the first half of 1994, residents of the San Luis Valley of southern central Colorado saw swarms of black helicopters appearing over their homes and places of business. These craft lacked any identification marks, which might have given a clue as to their source. These craft are reported to have been flying about the area and buzzing homes for about 2 years. These flights seem to be originating from and returning to the estimated 100,000 acre Baca Ranch, although no reconnaissance has of yet been done to see if the choppers are actually stationed there. During October and November of 1994, black helicopters which lacked any identification markings were observed in Dartmouth, Massachusetts, overflying the University of Massachusetts. To counter the alarm of the students and local residents, messages were flashed on local television and computer screens assuring them that military helicopter training was taking place and nothing else. Reports were received of helicopters flying so low that local residents could make eye contact with the pilots. Black helicopter flights have also been regularly seen for the past several years over Napa Valley, California, flying out of Hamilton Air Force Base. The helicopters are reported by reliable sources to have been supplying a sophisticated secret base of Bureau of Land Management property near Oakland or Oakville grade. Aerial reconnaissance of the area shows that the base includes concrete bunkers, a newly built road, what seem to be openings into an underground facility, and 8 to 10 microwave dishes apparently used for satellite communications. Asked to comment on the black helicopter traffic by Harry V. Martin, editor of the Napa Sentinel newspaper, an Air Force spokesman simply said that, and I quote, "The helicopter traffic over the Napa Hills is a classified operation," end of quote. In an article in the Napa Sentinel entitled "Mysterious Black Helicopters Stalking the Nation," Martin reported, quote, "In the Watsonville area, one such helicopter landed. Law enforcement officials went to investigate, but left the scene when encountering armed men in black uniforms. We had black helicopters come over here every day," state several Massachusetts families. "They were just plain with no markings." These type of helicopters have also been reported over Loring, Maine, Wurtsmith, Michigan, and Maelstrom, Montana, as well as northeastern New Mexico. Military officials in Colorado state that black helicopters seen in their areas do not belong to the military. The bulk of the helicopter traffic is seen throughout the United States from August through October, with some heavy activity in February, July, November, and December. At least 15 black helicopters, identified by witnesses as Bell OH-58D1 Kiowa Warriors, are currently, as of summer 1994, performing night missions out of the National Guard based in Tupelo, Mississippi. The helicopters were flown to the military base by members of C Company, 1st Battalion, 185th Aviation, from the Bell Helicopter Facility out of Fort Worth, Texas. These helicopters are equipped with the most high-tech of electronic surveillance equipment, included infrared digital laser trackers for tracking targets in the dark, and rocket pods capable of firing Stinger missiles for eliminating those who are tracked. Do you remember seeing the movie Outbreak? And they literally blew a vehicle full of American citizens to pieces with a missile. This is exactly what they're training for. I personally went to Fort Campbell Air Force Base, the 101st Airborne Division in Kentucky. And there was the full brigade of black helicopters, black helmets, black masks, black uniforms, and it was Task Force 160, Attack Division, that is being trained there. And the film that we saw, given a history of the particular air base, Fort Campbell, Kentucky, stated clearly that these black helicopters are known as Night Stalkers. They're to be sent anywhere in the United States and anywhere in the world to put down riots and rebellion. Why would they be training in urban drills all over America unless these black helicopters without markings are being trained to be turned over to the United Nations organization so that they can literally be used to put down all resistors that will not want to be a part of the New World Order? The book of Revelation chapter 13 verse 7 and 8 says that this beast will make war with the saints and overcome them. They're not going to allow any single individual stay outside of their system. They're going to fight you, me, anyone else that does not come under the protection of God Almighty. Jesus Christ described in Revelation chapter 12 that there would be a place of safety for a remnant, and the rest would have war made upon them in verse 17 of Revelation 12. But some are going to be in a place of safety because they surrender their total lives and wills to Jesus Christ of Nazareth now. They get in harmony with God's law, the laws that will rule the kingdom when Jesus Christ returns. As a direct result, they are going to come under divine protection during the time that is known as the Great Tribulation.